The creature near Ansegis was unlike the monsters Geralt usually hunted. It did not kill from hunger, territory, or the instinct to reproduce. It had been manufactured for violence. Its low, segmented body was protected by a hard carapace. Bristles and feelers allowed it to read vibrations through the ground. Its many limbs carried it through the undergrowth with the speed of a giant insect. The people of Ansegis called it whatever frightened name came most readily to mind. Geralt knew only that it had killed travelers for years and had learned to avoid ordinary traps. To bring it within reach, he calculated the path of a passing family and prepared to intercept the monster before it reached them. The calculation failed. The Idr changed its approach, struck from an unexpected direction, and killed the father before Geralt could close the distance. It turned on the woman and her daughter next. Geralt caught it as it prepared to leap, drove his sword into the joints of its armor, and forced it away from the survivors. The Idr fought without fear or pain, its pincers cutting the air around him, and its limbs raking the sand. Geralt severed one of its attacking appendages, opened the armor across its forebody, and pursued when it tried to flee. He pinned its rear section beneath his boot, broke through the carapace with repeated blows, and finally removed the flat head from the thrashing body. The mother and daughter survived, but the dead man remained beside the road. Geralt accepted no praise for saving 2 lives when his plan had cost a third. While inspecting the carcass, he found an inscribed metal plate embedded in the monster's body. It named the creature not as a natural species, but as an experimental specimen. The local reeve attempted to increase the official contract fee, so both he and Geralt could steal from the royal treasury. Geralt refused, collected only what had been agreed, and carried the plate away. It was evidence that somewhere a sorcerer had created the Idr, numbered it, and then allowed it to vanish into the world. He rode from Ansegis to Karak, a port city divided between royal splendor, commercial greed, and waterfront poverty. At the gate, he was ordered to surrender his swords. Before he could recover them, he was arrested on a fabricated charge of embezzling contract money. Someone had used the Ansegis invoice to construct a case against him. The court possessed no credible evidence, yet Geralt spent days in confinement, while officials treated his profession and mutations as proof of criminal character. He was eventually released, but the swords entrusted to the authorities had disappeared. His steel and silver blades, tools made specifically for his hands and work, had been stolen from a guarded storehouse. The search led him to Pyrrol Pratt, a wealthy criminal who collected influence, rare objects, and humiliating entertainment. Pratt knew the swords were being moved towards an auction in Novigrad, but he demanded payment in the form of a performance. Geralt was taken into a private arena, stripped to the waist, and sent in without a weapon. The creature waiting for him was a Vigilosaur, a magically modified guard lizard resembling a small wyvern with a disproportionate skull, long tail, and enough teeth to tear a man apart in a single rush. Geralt stopped its first charge with the heliotrope sign and drove it backwards with Ard, but signs alone could not kill it. The Vigilosaur attacked again and again, forcing him between the arena posts while its claws opened his back and shoulders. Geralt brought down a lantern and a weakened iron support. The burning lantern struck the beast, confusing it for a moment. He tore the sharpened bar from the sand, ran forward, and drove the iron through the top of its skull. The lizard convulsed around the spike until its brain ceased functioning. Pratt received the spectacle he wanted. Geralt received the name of the auction house and the date on which his swords were expected to appear. Before leaving, he made Pratt understand that another attempt to use him for amusement would end with Pratt inside the arena. The metal plates taken from the Idr and the Vigilosaur led Geralt to Rissberg, a mountain complex where sorcerers developed artificial species and weapons disguised as research. The scientists readily admitted that the Vigilosaur was one of their obsolete guard models. They were less comfortable when Geralt produced the Idr plate. Its markings connected it to older experiments associated with Idr of Olivo and the magical traditions of Alzor. Geralt asked how many specimens had been produced and how many were still killing people in forests and ruins. No one answered. The sorcerers preferred to describe themselves as creators, and Geralt as an eliminator, a useful professional who could destroy whatever escaped their laboratories without forcing them to accept responsibility. Rissberg hired him to patrol the Tukaj Hills, where charcoal burners, woodcutters, and isolated settlers had been massacred. Geralt worked with Constable Franz Torquil, a practical lawman who had already concluded that the violence originated at Rissberg. Torquil warned him that the sorcerers expected a witcher to clean up their failure and would blame that same witcher if the matter became public. Rain repeatedly erased tracks, and storms passed over the hills with unnatural frequency. Geralt refused to accuse the mages of controlling every cloud, but the constant downpours made the investigation slower and more dangerous. At each settlement, he examined the spacing of wounds, the direction of blood, the depth of footprints, and the unnatural weapons used against the dead. The evidence pointed not towards one uncontrolled beast, but towards deliberate massacres intended to resemble the work of monsters. At Pinetops, he found bodies scattered around a charcoal kiln. Adults had been dismembered, a child had been torn apart, and entrails had been stretched across the clearing. In the middle of the slaughter stood Sorel Degerlund, a young sorcerer from Rissberg, covered in blood and pretending to have survived the attack of a summoned demon. Geralt could have killed him immediately. Instead, he noticed that Degerlund lacked the strength to inflict several of the wounds, and that the blood on his clothing was too fresh for the entire massacre. He demanded that the sorcerer summon help. Degerlund offered to teleport them to Rissberg. The moment Geralt moved close enough for the spell, the sorcerer sent them somewhere else. They landed in a hidden laboratory where two immense ogre-like creatures called Boo and Bang seized Geralt and paralyzed his arms. Degerlund poisoned him with white scorpion venom and explained that Geralt's eyes would be removed while he was still alive. His reflective ocular tissue was valuable for further mutations. If he survived blindness, Degerlund intended to capture him again, dissect him, and send the pieces to Rissberg as a warning. The venom slowed Geralt's muscles and clouded his sight, but Degerlund's arrogance brought him within touching distance. Geralt formed the Somne sign and pressed his fingers against the sorcerer's face. Degerlund collapsed into enchanted sleep. Geralt could barely stand, yet he used the sorcerer as leverage, fought through the laboratory staff, and forced a route back to the outside world. He escaped without killing Degerlund. That restraint produced exactly the result Torquil had predicted. Rissberg captured the young mage, blamed the deaths on an uncontrollable demon, and reduced the punishment to confinement in the Citadel, an inaccessible laboratory inside Mount Cremora. The murdered labourers became an embarrassment to be concealed. Degerlund remained protected by his profession and his patrons. One of the few sorcerers who had opposed the cover-up, Pinetops, left Rissberg and gave Geralt an authentic Viriledian sword to replace part of what had been stolen.
Geralt then travelled towards Novigrad, hoping to intercept his original swords at the Borsody auction. Passage came aboard the Prophet Leoboda, a merchant cutter returning from a secret expedition. The men responsible first claimed they had gone to rescue an elven child abducted by an Aguara. Geralt knew the story was incomplete. Aguaras were not human shapeshifters, but fox creatures capable of taking human form. They preserved their species by taking elven girls and transforming them. Recovering such a child by force was almost impossible, and an Aguara protecting her daughter was not an enemy sensible men pursued.
The truth emerged once the vessel was underway. The expedition had captured a transformed girl, who was not the child they had supposedly gone to save. Some of the merchants intended to sell her. One of them, Parlagi, killed her. Her body was hidden below deck, while the prophet Leoboda attempted to escape through the river marshes. The Aguara followed. She first attacked through weather and illusion. A violent squall drove the ship away from the safe channel. False banks, beaches, and settlements appeared beyond the reeds, inviting the crew to abandon the cutter and step into deep swamp. Compass directions changed. Currents seemed to flow against nature. Then the iguana compelled Avodyanoi to attack. The great scaled creature struck the hull, seized the rudder in its teeth, and tore away part of the steering blade, while the sailors stabbed at it with hooks. When the attack ceased, several crewmen decided that Parlagi and the dead girl should be thrown overboard. Geralt despised the killer, but he refused to let a frightened mob murder him. Protecting a guilty man from immediate slaughter did not make the man innocent. It merely prevented the crew from becoming executioners. The swamp punished them without Geralt's assistance. One conspirator fled in a boat and was torn between a giant turtle and a crocodile. Others leaped into water that appeared safe and disappeared beneath masses of enormous leeches. The remaining men lost command of the ship. When the cutter became trapped beneath overhanging trees, the Aguara boarded. She changed from a dark fox into a tall, fox-headed woman and approached the corpse of the girl. Geralt placed the body before her and admitted that humans had committed the crime. He nevertheless stood between the Aguara and the survivors. He would not allow her grief to become indiscriminate slaughter. She took the dead girl into her arms. Geralt's refusal to move impressed neither forgiveness nor gratitude upon her. She promised that she would find him again when he had forgotten her, and expected no attack. Then she vanished into the swamp with her daughter. Geralt, the dwarf Adario Bach, and the surviving merchant escaped in a small boat. They reached the river, but the delay prevented Geralt from recovering his swords directly at the auction. Other hands had already taken possession of them. He returned to Karak carrying Pinetops' blade, and the knowledge that Degerlund was alive inside the Citadel.
The sorcerers had warned him that an assault on the mountain fortress would be suicide. Geralt decided that leaving Degerlund alive,
His route into Mount Cremora began at the home of Otto de Sart, a werewolf Geralt had once chosen not to kill. De Sart's wife and daughters were also lycanthropes. Mistaking Geralt's purpose, they transformed and attacked him inside their cottage. Geralt used the furniture, his studded gloves, and controlled blows to fend them away without drawing blood. De Sart arrived before the confrontation became fatal. In repayment for Geralt's earlier mercy, he agreed to use his heightened sense of smell to search the mountain caves.
they found chambers occupied by trolls, gremlins, bats, and vampiroids. One cave contained a sleeping gorgon, which they passed without disturbing. After hours of searching, de Sart detected the scent of an ordinary domestic cat where no domestic animal should have been. Geralt drank his elixirs and entered alone. He crawled through bat guano, an underground stream, and a narrow sump until he reached the Citadel's hidden interior. Bew and Bang were waiting. Their size made ordinary fencing useless, so Geralt attacked their balance, eyes, knees, and hands. He used Ard to break their formation and kept one giant between himself and the other. Their own strength became a liability. One wild blow intended for Geralt struck the second creature instead. Geralt finished the survivor before it recovered. De Sart, who had ignored the order to remain outside, entered during the fighting and killed one of Degerlund's armed servants in his wolf form. The werewolf had spent decades avoiding human blood. He chose that night to repay his debt. Beyond the guards lay the truth Rissberg had concealed. The floor of one chamber was black with old blood. Mutilated bodies had been thrown beside a pit where something still crushed bones in the darkness. The laboratory contained jars of human eyes, failed organisms, preserved heads, and dissected flesh. Harlan Zara, one of the sorcerers who had tried to expose Degerlund, floated dead in a vessel. On a steel table lay the body of a fair-haired child. Degerlund released his final creation, a grey, mouthless humanoid called Beta. It fought with a saber and moved faster than an ordinary man, but its technique was repetitive. The creature possessed speed without judgment. Geralt, strengthened by his elixirs, read the pattern, drew it into a predictable diagonal attack, passed beneath the blade, and cut it across the collarbone. His second stroke opened it beneath the arm. Beta collapsed, its hidden mouth splitting across its face only as it died. Degerlund attempted a fire spell. Geralt reached him before the spell was complete, cut through the forming globe, and opened both of the sorcerer's hands. This time there was no arrest, commission, or promise of supervision. Geralt dropped his sword, seized Degerlund from behind, and locked an arm around his throat. The mage pleaded, blamed Ortolan, blamed Rissberg, and declared that killing a human was forbidden. Geralt tightened his hold until the larynx, hyoid, and cervical vertebrae failed. Degerlund's black cat lay beside the body. Geralt told the animal that the killing had been necessary. The cat remained with its dead master. Geralt returned to Karak in time for King Belohun's wedding. The celebration was interrupted by a storm of catastrophic force. Wind tore roofs apart, the sea crossed the harbour walls, and collapsing structures crushed people beneath timber and masonry. Geralt abandoned court intrigues and used his strength where it mattered, pulling the trapped free, carrying the wounded, and dragging survivors from the water. He emerged cut, bruised, and barely able to put weight on one knee. Even the Vireledian sword left beneath shelter was stolen during the chaos.
After Karak, the Aguara found him again among old ruins. Geralt carried no wish to fight her. She had come armed with the same promise of vengeance, but the hatred between them had weakened. Each had seen the other protect lives that did not deserve protection. She departed without attacking.
A final confrontation came at a temple of Melitele. Brehen, an unstable witcher of the cat school, wanted the royal contract concerning the Striga of Vizima and threatened a priestess in order to force Geralt into a duel. Geralt refused to kill another witcher for a contract. He also warned Brehen that the moment he touched the priestess, the duel would cease to be optional. Brehen saw that the threat was real and withdrew. At the temple, Geralt's recovered steel and silver swords were returned to him through arrangements made by Yennefer. The Striga in Vizima remained alive, King Foltest's reward remained unclaimed, and Geralt rode towards another monster and another choice.
6 years after claiming an unborn child through the law of surprise, Geralt returned to Cintra and found 10 children racing through the dry moat beneath the castle walls. Mousak would not tell him which child belonged to Pavetta and Duni. The couple had vanished at sea, their ship swallowed by a storm, without leaving so much as a splinter, and Queen Calanthe had become the sole guardian of what remained of their blood. Geralt watched the children from above. Among the shouting boys ran a thin little girl with a fair plait, fierce enough to keep pace with them, but gentle enough to stop when the smallest child fell and began to cry. Calanthe waited beneath an old linden tree, seated on the suspended bench. Emeralds matched her green dress and the hard green of her eyes. A narrow gold band held back her mousy hair. Time and grief had altered her, but neither had softened her. She offered Geralt one attempt to identify the child promised to him. Whether he chose correctly or not, she said he could take one of the children and subject it to the training of a witcher, to the choice, the trial of the grasses, and the changes that killed, crippled, or drove mad far more boys than they transformed. Geralt refused. He had not come to drag a child away. He no longer believed that a chance demand made beside a royal banquet table could bind 2 lives. He admitted that he was afraid to accept responsibility for a child, afraid to place it beneath the hands of those who had remade him, afraid that the destiny he had invoked might be real. He told Calanby he had never been a child of surprise himself. He was a foundling, the unwanted son of a sorceress whose face he could barely remember. Whatever stories witches told about children destined to survive their trials, Geralt did not trust them enough to wager another life. Calanthe offered to show him Pavetta's child. He would not look. He renounced his claim and left Cintra. The queen let him go, though she warned that destiny might already be laughing at him. The road returned Geralt to work he understood better. He descended into a ruined dungeon where a basilisk had killed everyone who entered. The townspeople expected him to perish like the others because he carried no mirror.
But Geralt emerged through the rubble with the creature hanging from one hand by its long reptilian tail. Its curved, bird-like beak was clogged with blood and dust. Webbed wings sagged beside scaly legs armed with hooked talons, and the swollen dewlap beneath its throat had faded from crimson to a dirty russet. The alderman paid him 200 lintars. While Geralt had been underground, several men had tried to steal his horse and saddlebags. They had been stopped by a broad-shouldered stranger with thick chestnut curls and 2 Zeracanian women whose tattooed eyes, muscular limbs, and curved sabres made further argument unwise. The stranger called himself Borch 3 Jackdaws. Over food and beer, Borch questioned Geralt about the border between order and chaos, and about the creatures a witcher was willing to kill. Geralt hunted forktails, draca-lizards, and flying drakes, but true dragons were different. Green, red, black, or the almost unknown white dragons were ancient, intelligent, and exceedingly rare. He did not hunt them. Golden dragons, Geralt added, did not exist. Soon afterward, Dandelion brought news of a dragon near Bearfield. The creature had descended on grazing sheep and been poisoned by a carcass filled with nightshade, hellebore, brimstone, and tar. Wounded but alive, it had fled into the Kestrel Mountains. King Niedermere gathered celebrated hunters to finish it, claim its treasure, and use its severed head to strengthen his right to another kingdom. Geralt had no interest in the hunt until he learned that Yennefer had joined it. The sorceress rode a black horse and wore her usual black and white, her raven curls held beneath a golden net, and the obsidian star at her throat catching the firelight. 4 years had passed since Geralt had left her in Vengerberg without waking her. She had not forgiven him. They nevertheless followed the hunters into the mountains. The poisoned dragon was not waiting in the valley. Another creature sat upon a low hill beneath the limestone walls. Its long neck formed a graceful curve above a domed chest. Large golden eyes watched the approaching company, while broad bat-like wings rested against a body armored from talons to tail in clearly outlined scales blazing like yellow gold. There was something feline in its stillness and elegance, something too beautiful and deliberate to belong to an ordinary reptile. Geralt had declared such a creature impossible, yet the golden dragon introduced himself as Villentretenmerth and challenged the hunters to face him honorably. Ike of Dennis Lee accepted first. The knight was a fanatic, but he had killed manticores, griffins, and dragons before, and few men handled a lance better. Villentretenmerth evaded his charge with one soft, cat-like movement, swept him from the saddle, and left him with shattered legs and a broken back. Yennefer asked Geralt to take the next challenge. She did not want the dragon's gold. Someone had offered her a procedure that might restore what the transformations of sorcery had taken from her, the ability to bear a child. The price was beyond money, but the body of a golden dragon might purchase it. Geralt still refused to kill the creature. The other hunters abandoned honor soon afterward. They bound Geralt, Yennefer, Dandelion, and the sorcerer Dora-Garay, then attacked Villentretenmerth together. Only when a small green-grey dragonling crawled from the grass did Geralt understand. The golden dragon had not come for treasure. He had come to protect the offspring of the poisoned she-dragon. The Bearfield militia cast heavy fishing nets over Villentretenmerth. Tyr and Vea, Bork's Zaracanian companions, charged from the northern gorge with their sabres flashing. Yennefer thrust her bound ankles towards Geralt and ordered him to use Igni. The sign burned through the ropes and scorched her skin, but it freed her. Half kneeling and white with pain, she answered the attackers with magic, turning men into birds, reptiles, insects, and squealing striped piglets, while the Zaracanians cut down those who remained armed. Villentretenmerth broke free and destroyed the cobbler who had poisoned the she-dragon. When the killing ended, Borch 3 Takdors returned. The golden dragon could assume any shape. The chestnut-haired traveller, his 3 black birds, and his human voice had all belonged to Villentretenmerth. The she-dragon had summoned him because creatures called monsters were increasingly unable to defend themselves from human greed. They needed a protector, he said, something resembling a witcher.
The dragonling was his purpose, proof that even a unique mutation might endure, and that the limits Geralt and Eve fixed were not fixed at all. Before leaving, Villentretenmerth looked at Geralt and Yennefer and saw what neither could hide. They had been made for one another, he told them, but nothing would come of it.
His judgment proved harder to escape than any dragon. In Edginvile, Geralt accepted a contract on a Zeugl living beneath the town's refuse. The creature hid under dead sheep, broken furniture, and rotting vegetables. When it attacked, the midden erupted around an enormous, bulbous body, deformed like a grotesque potato. 4 tentacles, thick as branches and tipped with spiked clubs, dragged Geralt through the filth, toward a broad mouth packed with heavy, uneven teeth. The Witcher allowed it to pull him close. His sword severed the tentacles, smashed through the teeth, and entered the body between its weakly shining eyes. The Zeugl collapsed across the rubbish, like a punctured bladder, releasing warm gusts of sweet, suffocating decay. Geralt returned to Yennefer covered in slime, and learned that the filth outside was simpler than what waited in their room. Yennefer had been meeting Istred, a grey-eyed sorcerer with slightly grizzled hair and a mild face that concealed neither intelligence nor pride. He had known her far longer than Geralt had. Their relationship had survived years of separations and returns, and now Istred had asked her to remain with him permanently. Geralt and Istred each demanded that Yennefer choose. Neither understood that she had already judged herself incapable of giving either man what he offered. Istred gave her stability and a declared future. Geralt gave her a devotion he could not name. When Yennefer asked for the one word he had never spoken, he hid behind the claim that witches had been strict of emotion, and that any declaration from him would be only an empty sound.
She did not believe him. Yennefer fashioned 2 black kestrels through creational magic, one for each man. Then she left Edginvale and abandoned them both. Geralt and Istred arranged to settle the matter with a duel, but when Geralt understood that Istred no longer intended to defend himself, that the sorcerer wanted Geralt's sword to end what Yennefer's departure had hollowed out, he refused to fight. No one had won. The Zeugl had been easier to understand.
In Novigrad, Geralt encountered another supposed monster when 2 identical halfling merchants
began fighting inside an inn. One was dainty Bibervelt, the other lost its borrowed shape beneath Geralt's grip and became a long-limbed, sagging figure resembling a mass of fermenting dough. Its nose hung loose over glutinous lips, its ears drooped, and dull yellow eyes glared from a face that seemed in danger of melting.
It called itself Teleco Longreving Latort. Its friends called it Dudu. Dudu was a Doppler. He could transform his living structure completely, reproducing not only a victim's body, but clothing, voice, gestures, habits, and much of the mind. Silver prevented him from changing, but did not burn him, another reason Geralt refused to classify him with creatures that existed only to feed or kill. Dudu had attacked Dainty on the road, taken his identity, and sold his horses. Yet he had not murdered the halfling when doing so would have protected the deception. In Novigrad, he had used Dainty's money with such instinctive commercial brilliance that the trades he arranged were producing a considerable profit.
The city's religious authorities would have burned him alive if they found him. During the pursuit that followed, Dudu fled into the slaughterhouse district and assumed Geralt's form. White hair appeared around the copied face. Black leather and silver studs covered the copied body, and a copied sword formed in the copied hand. He inherited Geralt's stance, reflexes, and thoughts. But he could not inherit everything. Geralt told him that he could reproduce anger, skill, and the memory of violence, but not the part of a man capable of cold-blooded murder. Dudu had spared Dainty because he was fundamentally gentle. Whatever shape he wore, he remained a frightened, good-natured creature, trying to survive in a world that had destroyed most of his kind. Geralt sheathed his sword. Dudu's safety was finally secured by Chapelle, Novigrad's feared Minister of Security, who was himself a Doppler. The original Chapelle had died from apoplexy, and another survivor had taken his place so perfectly that no one noticed. Dudu became Dainty's cousin and business factor, hiding in plain sight among people who considered themselves incapable of being deceived by monsters. Once again, Geralt left without a corpse. On the coast near Bremervord, his work began with a love affair. Duke Agloval wanted to marry a mermaid named Shienaz. She rose from the sea with wet willow-green hair, a graceful human body above the waist, and powerful notched flukes below it. Agloval demanded that she exchange her tail for legs. Shienaz argued that he could just as reasonably exchange his legs for a tail. Each insisted that the other make the sacrifice. Geralt's attempt to mediate failed, and Agloval refused to pay him. The Duke reconsidered when a boat of pearl divers was found drifting near the Dragon Fangs. 7 people had vanished from it. No bodies remained, but the deck was awash with blood. Fear closed the fishing grounds, and Agloval hired Geralt to remove what had killed them. At a local celebration, Geralt met Essi Daven, a poet and singer called Little Eye. She was no more than 18, slender, dressed in blue, with luxuriant dark gold hair. A single curl usually covered one eye, but whenever she blew it aside, both were revealed, large, brilliant, and dark blue enough to justify every song written about them.
Essi fell in love with Geralt almost immediately. Geralt recognized it and could do nothing useful with the knowledge. At low tide, he and Dandelion crossed the exposed seabed toward the Dragonfangs. Between reefs covered in weed and shellfish, they discovered immense white marble steps descending into black water.
A bell sounded somewhere below, muffled by the weight of the sea.
Then the water opened. Fish-eyed warriors surged onto the steps. They had rough green hands, dilated gills, toothed muzzles, and combs rising from their heads. Copper and tortoise shell protected their limbs, and they carried spears, serrated blades, and curved swords. One met Geralt at equal height and almost equal speed, its iridescent eyes revealing nothing as it hid its sword beneath the surface. Geralt killed it by the smallest advantage. Others followed.
The rising tide filled the trenches around the reefs and turned the battlefield into a trap. Geralt held the creatures back, while Dandelion fled. Then a wave tore him from the rocks. A blade opened his left arm, and clawed hands dragged him toward the seabed. A booming conch answered from above. Hyenas came riding a grey dolphin through the surf. She held the sea warriors back long enough for Geralt to reach land, and warned him not to return. The sea did not belong to him.
Geralt reported that Aglavul was not facing an animal, but an intelligent race with weapons, armor, metalworking, and a civilization hidden below the Dragonfangs. He refused to lead armed boats against them. Aglavul withheld payment again and offered him permanent employment in the coming war. Geralt rejected that as well.
Shinaz eventually came ashore in a sea-coloured gown, walking on newly made legs. She had chosen the transformation not because Aglavul had defeated her will, but because she had decided that love without sacrifice was only possession. Geralt could offer Essi no similar answer. She gave him honesty. He answered with silence, because every tenderness reminded him of black curls, violet eyes, and lilac and gooseberries. Dandelion finally forced them to speak plainly. Geralt and Essi spent one night together and parted soon afterward, carrying affection that could not become a shared life. They never met again.
4 years later, Essi died during a smallpox epidemic in Vizima. Dandelion carried her away from the funeral pyres and buried her alone in the forest with her lute and the sky-blue pearl Geralt had given her. He composed a ballad in which their love overcame death. He never sang it. More than a year after Edginvale, Geralt found Yennefer again among the Beltane fires. The night was filled with dancing smoke and couples disappearing beyond the circles of light. Yennefer stood apart from the peasant women in a black velvet cloak, her obsidian star shining at her throat. She and Geralt tried to speak as strangers and failed. They spent the remaining darkness together beneath the trees, knowing that dawn would separate them once more. Yennefer remembered Villentretenmerth's judgment. They might have been created for one another, but destiny alone could not hold them together. Something more was required, and neither of them yet knew how to give it. Before morning, she told Geralt to return to Cintra. Dangerous times were approaching. He must not abandon the child again. The road took him instead into Brokilon. The Dryad's forest was an old green realm that killed intruders before they understood they had crossed its border. Geralt entered as an envoy and was led deeper by Brehen, a blue-eyed, fair-haired archer who had once been human, but now moved through the undergrowth with the silence of something born among trees. A child's scream broke the stillness. Geralt forced his way into a clearing and saw an immense Yigan closing on a small figure pressed against a dead hornbeam. The monster was a 12-foot myriapod, its flat body armored in dark brown segments. Bright yellow hooked legs rippled beneath it like the oars of a galley. Long feelers tested the air for heat, and venom dripped from pincers surrounding a dark red mouth. Geralt struck the child aside and attacked. His sword failed to penetrate the chiton. The yearn coiled its rear body around his legs and pulled him down while turning its pincers toward him. Brehen's arrows pinned it repeatedly to the tree, each shaft breaking as the monster writhed. Geralt freed himself, found the vulnerable line between its plates, and severed its head against the trunk. The child was not a dryad. She was a small human girl with tangled mousy hair, expensive boots, and enormous green eyes. Dirt covered her delicate hands and face, but none of it concealed the authority in her voice when she objected to being questioned like a peasant. Her name was Ciri. Geralt did not understand at first. He only knew that something about her was familiar. As they travelled, she revealed that she was Princess Cirilla of Cintra, granddaughter of Calanthe and daughter of Pavetta. The child he had refused had found him in the deadliest forest in the north. At Duwen Canal, they were received by Ithne, ruler of Brokilon. She was small and slender in a gauzy light green gown, but her grey face and resolute mouth made her seem taller. Her hair and eyes shone like molten silver. Ithne intended to keep Ciri. Brokilon survived by taking human girls, giving them its water, and erasing the lives they had known. Brehen herself still remembered that she had once been called Mona, though she fought the memory whenever it surfaced. Ciri did not want to remain. She wanted to leave with Geralt, because, she said, he was her fate. Ithne placed the silver goblet in her hands. Ciri drank the water of Brokilon. Geralt had seen what such draughts could do: convulsions, terror, and the slow emptiness replacing a child's identity. But Ciri remained herself. She looked into Ithne's silver eyes and chose Geralt. When Geralt drank what remained, the water struck through his witcher immunity. He saw Calanthe waiting beneath the linden tree, Yennefer among the Beltane fires, and Ciri's green eyes drawing him back from the black forest into which he always fled. He saw a bloodied queen and heard that the sword of destiny had two edges. One was himself, the other might be death. Ithne released them. Outside Brokilon, they found mercenaries standing over murdered merchants and blaming the dryads. Ciri noticed what the men had overlooked. The tree used to block the road had been felled with an axe, something no dryad would have done. The killers turned on her. Geralt drew steel. He killed their leaders before the others could loose their bows. Then arrows came from the forest, silent and unerring, and the surviving murderers fell beneath the vengeance they had tried to provoke. Mousesack arrived to take Ciri home. He urged Geralt to come with them, not to turn the bond between himself and the child into something twisted by repeated rejection. Geralt still refused. Death followed him, and he believed leaving Ciri was the only way to protect her. He rode away while she stood on a hill calling after him, declaring that he could not escape, because she was his destiny.
Geralt did not turn back. When he finally tried to return to Cintra, he found Dandelion among refugees fighting to cross the Yurga. Nilfgaard had invaded through the mountain passes, annihilated the Cintran army, and surrounded the capital. Calanthe, wounded while covering the retreat, had died by throwing herself from the battlements rather than be captured. The keep had fallen. Almost no one had survived. Dandelion knew nothing of Ciri. Geralt assumed she had died because he had left her. Later, after the Battle of Sodden had broken Nilfgaard's advance, he encountered a merchant named Yurga, trapped with his cart on a decaying bridge.
Beneath it lay the bones of travelers who had taken the same abandoned road.
Night was coming. Geralt offered Yurga escape, but the merchant refused to abandon a year's worth of goods. In desperation, he promised the Witcher anything he asked. Geralt invoked the old law once more. Yurga would give him whatever awaited at home that the merchant did not expect to find. Then Geralt prepared. He drank his elixirs, drew the silver sword, and walked alone into the center of the bridge. The potions drained the color from his face and widened his pupils until Yurga barely recognized him as human.
The creatures emerged from the darkness in a hissing pack. They were less than 4 feet tall, horribly thin, with bony knees lifted in a jerking, heron-like gait. Yellow eyes burned beneath flat, filthy foreheads. Small fangs filled broad, frog-shaped mouths, and long forelimbs ended in scaly talons. Geralt cut them apart as they swarmed over him. One seized Yurga by the head, and Geralt removed it without touching the merchant. Others dragged the Witcher over the side of the bridge. The fighting continued below among the rocks and bones, silver flashing in the darkness, until the last shriek ended. Geralt climbed back wounded. Bites had opened his thigh almost to the bone.
He managed one step towards Yurga's cart before collapsing.
The merchant did not leave him. During the journey through Sodden, Geralt drifted through fever and memories. A healer eventually reached the cart. She was slight, dressed in men's clothing, with a pale face and flame-red hair tied back by a snakeskin band. Magic vibrated through Geralt's medallion when she touched him. Her name was Vicenna. Geralt recognized the sorceress who had given birth to him and then surrendered him to the witches. Vicenna healed the infected wound, spending so much power that blood ran from her nose. Geralt wanted an explanation for the choice that had shaped his entire life.
He wanted her to look into the altered eyes created by the trials and tell him whether she had known what would be done to him.
Vicenna would not defend herself or ask forgiveness. Nothing could reverse her decision or his transformation. Before dawn, she placed him under a spell and left, denying him the confrontation he had imagined since childhood. Geralt awoke with answers. Yurga's road passed the hill where 14 sorcerers were believed to have fallen defending Sodden. Ordinary people had covered the foot of the monument with wildflowers. Fever and exhaustion made Geralt see a fair-haired woman waiting beside the stone, the shape of death itself. He imagined Yennefer's name among the dead, and for the first time looked back at the presence that had followed him all his life.
Death refused to take him that day. When the vision faded, Yennefer's name was not on the monument. Yurga still intended to honor his promise. He had 2 sons and offered one to Geralt, arguing that a profession devoted to protecting lives could not be entirely evil. Geralt admitted that he no longer knew how to divide good from evil with certainty. The merchant answered that doubt itself was human. Only evil never doubted. At Yurga's home, his wife ran to meet them. She had taken in an orphaned girl found by druids among the children scattered by the war, something Yurga had not expected to find upon his return.
A very thin, mousy-haired child emerged behind the merchant's sons, her enormous green eyes fixed on the white-haired man beside the cart. She ran before anyone could stop her. Geralt reached her in the middle of the farmyard and fell to his knees. Ciri wrapped her arms around his neck, certain that he had finally come for her, certain that he had found her because she was his destiny. Geralt held her as he had refused to hold her in Cintra, in Brokilon, and in every choice that had followed. She was no longer merely the child promised by an old law. She was something more.